All right, good morning. It's good to see you. We're in John chapter 13 this morning. One of the things we've been noticing is how that there's things that John does a little differently with his gospel than Matthew, Mark, and Luke did with theirs. Who remembers what the name for Matthew, Mark, and Luke together are called? What kind of gospels are they? Synoptic, one I, yeah, synoptic. Uh, they generally have the same outline. They have a lot of the same stories. But when you read John, after having read the others, John's very different. We've talked about why, right? John is the oldest living apostle when he writes his. The others have already been written, and he's read them, probably. Would stand a reason that he had. And if he was an old guy like old guys are today, he could remember stuff from 40 years ago better than he could remember what he had for breakfast. You know, there's three signs you're getting old. One is you start forgetting stuff, and I can't remember what the other two are. You need to be nice. I mean, I might have to call your daughter and tell on you. I know. Oh, man. So, back to the idea of where John does use things a little differently. In chapter 12, we noticed that whereas in the synoptic gospels, there's 2 years in a row that Jesus clears the temple. In John, instead of telling about the second clearing of the temple, John replaces that with a story of the Greeks coming to the temple to talk to Jesus. You don't find the story about the Greeks coming to the temple to find Jesus and the others. And in John's gospel, he only gives the account of one clearing of the temple, which is one of those little details about Jesus' life that you should probably think about sometime. There were 2 times that he chased the money changers out of the temple. How many times did he feed a crowd miraculously? At least twice. So there's several of those things there's 2 of them when, if we're not very thoughtful about it, we tend to put them all together and think there's just one. In chapter 13, in chapter 13, see, John doesn't tell us about the Last Supper. John tells us about a lot of things that happened in the Garden of Gethsemane. But in place of where the synoptics talk about the Last Supper and the details of the Last Supper, any idea what you think John might stick in there? If you hadn't thought about it, you might not know. One Tanner. What John substitutes is the washing of the feet. The story of the washing of the feet isn't found in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It's found in John. And it's just one of those little interesting details that I thought I'd bring up to you there. All right, so let's start in chapter 13, verse 1. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress. The devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. And that's what John tells us that Mark takes verses and verses to tell us. Mark tells us about the meal, about the cups of wine, the interactions with Judas and John and Peter. All John tells us is the evening meal was in progress, right? It's like, meanwhile, Verse, verse 3. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Now, let's stop and talk about this for just a minute. At least think about it a little bit. In those days, whose job was it to take off dirty shoes and wash dusty feet? Servant of the slave. Whoever was the lowest on the pecking order, right? Whoever was the least important, had the least authority, they were the ones that were given that job. Anybody want to guess why? After Jesus had sent these guys to prepare for this meal, and they did, they prepared the food, they prepared the banquet, they prepared everything. Anybody want to guess why nobody was washing anybody's feet? Well, maybe, but see, there you go. We've been seeing in Jesus' life, especially in the book of Mark, where over and over and over again, Jesus tells them that the path to greatness is giving yourself away, serving others, doing for others, helping others. That's the true path to people thinking you're really somebody important. And yet when he goes away and he comes back and he says, what were you guys arguing about? What do they always argue about? Well, I'm the most important. No, I'm the most important. No, I'm the most to Jesus. No, he trusts me more than he trusts you. That was their argument back and forth. And he keeps trying to show them different ways that's not true. And so now they come to this meal where he has told them, he's the master, he's told them as his students, you prepare the meal for me, which is supposed to include cleaning your feet so you're not sitting under the table with dirty, stinky feet. And they took care of everything except the most lowly, least important job of the day. And apparently none of them were willing to do it. I mean, usually when you've got a group of people, if something's going undone, usually somebody will get embarrassed and say, oh, okay, I'll do it. And they'll go empty the garbage, or they'll go wipe the table, or they'll do whatever, you know. Exactly. You can, but in their culture, that was part of being a host, showing hospitality, taking care of people that were under your roof. Something we don't do much in America. Everybody's for themselves, right? But in their culture, that was part of the mark of how important a household you had. Was things like, did they wash your feet? At the end of a meal, how much food was left over to give to the poor? That's why it was such a big deal when Jesus fed the crowds. How much he had left over, right? We don't think that way, right? We think if there's a little bit left over, we'll get some plastic bowls out and send bowls home with people. But it's not the big thing that is for us to have a lot of food left over and have to figure out some way to get it to somebody that can eat it. But that's part of the way they did the feet thing as well. So that's a good question. That's a good question. Interestingly, verse 3, we just read, Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God, which tells you what kind of a position did Jesus have in the pecking order of things. He was the top dog. He was God made flesh. He was set as God's emissary. He knew that God had given him this authority. He was going to go back to his Father again, and knowing that, he voluntarily took the least important, dirtiest job in the room. Right? Why would he do that? Well, because he keeps trying over. He knows that his death is coming soon, and he knows his disciples just aren't getting it. He keeps trying to teach them and tell them that the important thing is not you, the important thing is other people. The important thing is not what you want. The important thing is how can you help other people. It's not what makes your life better or easier. It's what do you do to make other people's life easier or better. Even today in the church, we have trouble with this. We have people that they think that the church is a club that they pay dues to, and that it's the club's job to give them services that members have. It's not the biblical picture of a church. It is the picture that many people have. And apparently it's kind of the picture that the apostles had at this point in Jesus' ministry too, right? It's like, well, we're the top guys here. We're his lieutenants. We're with him all the time. We're really somebody important. We can't lower ourselves to do a do nothing job because I'm too important for that. It's not the way it's supposed to be in God's kingdom. And people who try to live that way in God's kingdom, they never get what they want. They never feel the way they should feel. They never have the happiness that they could have otherwise. Why? Because other people are looking out for their own stuff too. And if everybody's looking out for their own stuff, then nobody but me is looking out for me. Well, I want to look out for me, but I want all y'all to look out for me too. Well, it doesn't work that way. For the game to work, I have to look after you, and you have to look out for me. And we kind of get that as Midwesterners, but not really, because we take a lot of pride in doing stuff on our own so that we won't owe anybody. We're not in debt to anybody. They can't hold it over our head because, I didn't ask them to do anything to help me. Verse 4, so he got up from the meal, he took off his outer clothing, he wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Can you imagine what it felt like in that room? When the Lord and Master, who's supposed to be the guy in charge, and you're supposed to be listening to him and taking care of him. See, that was the other job, especially in Jesus' day, and it still is today too. Bible teaches that if there's someone who helps you spiritually, you're supposed to help them physically. It goes all the way back to Abraham paying tithes to the priest of Midian. Melchizedek, the priest of Midian, yeah. Yeah, I imagine there was a lot of shuffling. I bet it got really quiet. Everybody kind of looking at the floor, shuffling their feet a little bit, looking at them, cutting their eyes at each other. Why?
So why didn't somebody offer to do it? No, you don't need to do that. Let me do that.
See, that's what should have happened. That's what should have happened. Yeah, that's what should have happened. But all the way back in Jesus' day, his closest disciples were still not perfect and didn't always do what they were supposed to do. So what do we think is going to happen today with his disciples? We're not always going to do what we're supposed to do. And other people that we think know better won't always do better either. Yeah. I remember I went to a birthday party one time for a professor of mine, and he invited all the students to come for a backyard cookout. And I got there early, and there was nobody there except me and him, and he was out on the back deck in the hot sun cooking hamburgers on his own grill. And I walked out and said, Ray, where is everybody? He said, I don't know. He said, it's not quite time for the party to start yet. I said, so why are you cooking your own burgers? And he looked around and he said, who else is going to do it? I said, give me the spatula, I will. That's what should have happened with these guys with Jesus, right? It's like one of them should have said, oh, I'll do it. But the problem was they were all so invested over the past days and weeks in this argument about who's the greatest, who's the most important, that if anybody had blinked and taken that job, that would have been like saying, you win, I lose. Nobody wants to lose. Nobody wants to lose, right? Um, Verse 6 says, he came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Now, what's wrong with the way Peter said that? Look at the sentence again and just kind of think about the words. Lord, are you going to wash my feet? What does the word Lord mean? Master, boss. In this situation, in this little kingdom king, whatever the kingdom is at that point, is it somebody's backyard with a grill of hamburgers or not? He calls him Lord, but then he questions what he's doing. You ever do that in your prayers, by the way? I have to admit that I have. The Bible tells us that God's thoughts are not our thoughts, his ways are not our ways. And so it shouldn't surprise us if sometimes in our prayers we say, God, what are you doing? And we're supposed to cast our cares on him, but just think about the ridiculousness of that prayer. God, what are you doing? As if I had the authority to ask him a question about what he's doing, as if I had the power to stop him and make him do something else, as if what he wanted wasn't more important than what I want. But yet I still sometimes feel that way, and I ask the question. And yeah, Job says, I wish I could stand in court with God and plead my case before a judge. And even if you remember from the book of Job, in the first of the book, at the end of the book, God says in both places that Job didn't do anything wrong, that he didn't deserve all those bad things that happened to him. So he really did have a case for why are these bad things happening to me when I did good, right? But see, that's the answer. The answer is there's one God, and I'm not it. Here, Peter says, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? And then he doubles down. Jesus says, you don't realize what I'm doing, but later you'll understand. No, Peter said, you'll never wash my feet. Imagine the juxtaposition of the word Lord and the word no. How out of balance is that? How out of place is that? Lord and no. We're going to do it my way, not yours. You see a problem with that?
Peter still doesn't understand.
No, he didn't. Still didn't understand. Jesus said, unless I wash you, you can have no part with me. Then Simon Peter, I bet kind of haughtily, with a bounce to his voice, says, well, don't just wash my feet, but my hands and my head as well. Give me a bath. And Jesus said, no, you don't understand. Those who need a bath, those who have had a bath need to only wash their feet when they get dusty. Why did Jesus do this?
To show that even the boss can do the dirty work.
I think that was a big piece of it. I've always preferred working for bosses that would jump in and do the dirty work with me. That's the guy that would sit in the air-conditioned truck and tell me what to do, right?
Basically, this whole conversation with Peter was leading up to verse 11.
Yeah. See, verse 11 is that thread that keeps going through all these stories at this time in Jesus' life. He knew who was going to betray him, and that is why he said not everyone was clean. See, Judas was there at the meal when this was going on.
Can you imagine how hard that would be to sit in the same room with somebody you know is going to betray you and treat him just like you've always treated
If we've got time this morning, we're going to talk a little further down and talk about how much even worse it was when you look at the way they sat at the tables and what that meant in Jesus' day. Yeah. Where is the phrase that says he showed them the full extent of his love? My iPad doesn't, I don't have it underlined. Anyway, the idea is that Jesus knew his words weren't getting through. His miracles weren't getting through. He'd tell them and they wouldn't understand. He'd tell them they wouldn't understand. He'd show them they wouldn't understand. He'd show them they wouldn't understand. Here they obviously still don't understand. And so I think Jesus chose a way to kind of embarrass them. Wouldn't be embarrassing for me. It's like, oh, you won't wash my feet? Go ahead. You can wash my feet if you won't wash my feet. I've had my feet washed. Have you had your feet washed? You ever done that? We, in Pennsylvania, several different times, we had some people who were religious Christians but cultural Jews come for Passover. We had a couple different times. We had instead of a potluck, we had a Passover meal where they conducted the meal just like you would if you were in a Jewish house with a Jewish family. Same items of foods and the washing of the feet and all that. Now, the first time anybody's ever washed my feet, I remember how weird that felt. It just felt weird. And yet it felt just as weird when it was my turn to wash somebody else's feet that night. That felt weird too. It's humbling. It's almost like it's too intimate. You're too far into their private bubble. It's hard to. Well, maybe, but I have to tell you, when it was happening to me, I wasn't thinking about the quality of the cleaning job. It was more emotional than that. It was.
A decade or two ago, we had a VBS that involved this list, and the teachers washed the kids' feet, and that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I bet kids would have less trouble with it than I did.
Your earlier comment about showing them the full extent of his love, it was an earlier version of the NIV, so that they just changed the phraseology.
Change the phraseology, yeah. The idea, I was going to say, the idea is there, but I wasn't just catching the wording. Thanks for, that's always good. I like to know that kind of stuff. Yeah. All right. So let's read a little bit further. Verse 12, Jesus says, when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. And the answer is, no, they didn't understand. He didn't really even give them a chance to answer the question because he keeps talking. He says, you call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that's what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than he who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed to do them. Do you think that the point of all this was clean feet? Or was there something more going on here? Yeah, there was something more going on here. The point was, they were saying Lord and Master, but they weren't living it. They weren't acting it. They weren't thinking it. And as a result, they were however they felt about it when they saw him doing the lowliest job that was beneath the dignity of a master to do.
Has he told them yet that whoever wants to be the greatest among you must be the servant of all? Have
Yes.
they already heard those words?
All they've heard those words multiple times, but they didn't get it.
I think verse 17 is sort of a key in that. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. They didn't get the opposite. If you don't do them, you won't be blessed. I mean, that's what didn't sink in.
Exactly. I don't think he was just talking about clean feet here. I think he was talking about any situation that a person finds themselves in where there's an inner conflict between what I want and what someone else needs me to do for them. Or even not even the word needs, just would be good for me to do for them. Well, I'm not doing that. I remember my mom before she passed. She had a lot of trouble with ingrown gnarly toenails, and before she came to stay with me, one of the first things that one of my sisters told me was, the worst thing about having mom stay with you is when she asks you to trim her toenails for her. She said, they smell bad, they look bad, it's hard to do, and if you get it done, it hurts her and she kind of bleeds. And well, I was willing to do that, but she didn't want me to do it. It was like she wanted Tammy to do it, but she didn't want me taking care of her feet. It's like, Mom, I don't mind doing it. Yeah, but Tammy can do it, but I don't want you to do it. So I talked to a couple of the older ladies at church and found out where they got their nails done and started paying to have her nails done. Which made everybody a whole lot happier except me, because that was my money I was spending, right? But was it my money that I was spending? If Jesus is my Lord and Master, if, as the Bible says, I've been bought with a price and I am not my own, was I really spending my money on her toes? Not really. It was money that God was letting me hold on to and use and manage. But ownership for all that belongs to God when you become a Christian. Everything you are, everything you have, everything you will be, whoever you are, whatever you accomplish, it all belongs to God. Why? Because you have been bought with a price. You are not your own. You were a slave to sin, and he bought your slavery and set you free, which means ethically and morally, and even in the spiritual world legally, you and everything about you belongs to the guy that bought you. We're just very fortunate that he's a loving God and a graceful master. He believes in the word hesed. He gives us good things that we don't deserve. And so that's the point that we ought to remember from this is it's not just about clean feet. It's not just, well, if we start doing the Jewish thing on the Passover and have if we wash each other's feet once a year, we're good, we're done. Check that on the board. No. The kind of things he's talking about doing are the kinds of things that would affect us the way the foot washing affected Peter. We've got to learn that there is one God, not us. And if we really want to be important, we've got to do the stuff that the lowest people do. And that's the story of the washing of the feet. I hope you get a chance sometime to have your feet washed or to wash somebody's feet, because it brings home the feelings of these verses a lot more than just the words and the thoughts. I think that's about all I wanted to mention about this verse. Luke. Oh, I want to check this one verse here. Okay. Let's look at verse 18. We're still in John chapter 13. Jesus starts this section of his talking by saying, I'm not referring to all of you. In other words, what I'm getting ready to say doesn't apply to everybody here, but he says, I know the ones that I've chosen, but this is to fulfill the passage of Scripture. He who shared my bread has turned against me. This is in Psalm 41. Verse 19 says, I'm telling you now before it happens, so that when it does happen, you will believe that I am who I am. Very truly, I tell you, whoever accepts anyone I send accepts me. Whoever accepts me accepts the one who sent me. And after he was saying this, Jesus was troubled in his spirit and said, very truly, I tell you, one of you is going to betray me.
And I bet they all said, not me, not me.
That's what you would think. If I was in the group, that's probably what I'd say. That's one of the interesting things about the passage is that isn't what they do. They all start asking, is it me? Which is a much better question. Right? Is it me? Am I going to be the one?
Since they were forewarned, couldn't they make sure they didn't betray?
They could have. Peter said he would. Peter told Jesus he didn't know what he was talking about when he said, you'll deny me 3 times before the rooster crows. And yet, before sunup the next day, he had done that very thing. Yeah. See, that's one of the sobering things about being a Christian is God warned us about a lot of things that we ought to be able to do something about, right? Yeah. You're not supposed to lie. You're not supposed to cheat. You're not supposed to steal. You're not supposed to talk badly about somebody behind their back. You're supposed to do good to those who treat you badly. You're supposed to give away cups of cold water. And every single time we think, well, I did that mostly, kinda, I think. Right? It's just the way things were. The disciples stared at one another at a loss to know which of them he meant. Verse 23, one of them, the disciple whom Jesus loved. By the way, who was the disciple whom Jesus loved? John. In the book of John, John never refers to John by name. John always refers to himself in here's a $20 word for you, a circumlocution. Circumlocution, not location, circumlocution. It means a speaking around instead of getting to the point. It's using a euphemism instead of a sharp single word.
But Jesus loved all of them.
Sure.
But John wanted to point out he loved me.
See, you got to remember that John was the baby brother of the group. He was the youngest of the 12. And in a group of guys, if you're in the military or in construction or whatever else, I'm not sure if girls do this so much. They tend to be a little more catty and packish. But with guys, the new guy in the crew can count on getting 2 things from that group. Number 1 is a hard time. I won't tell you what it means, but the acronym is you're the NFG. The second thing they can count on is that after they've been there a little while and after they've learned, after they've helped pull their weight a little bit, the second thing they can count on is some of those older grumpy guys taking up for them and teaching them stuff. Now, sometimes the old guys do that because it makes their job a little easier if another guy can hand the correct wrench or whatever. But that's the two things that at least in packs of men, that you can count on. So the young guy is going to get picked on, and the young guy is going to be looked out after. Somebody's going to be watching over his shoulder, number one, to make sure he doesn't mess up, and number two, to make sure he doesn't get in trouble. Right, exactly. And so John, being the young guy in the fraternity, had that experience with Jesus and the other disciples. His older brother James was part of this group, right? And so he was like the baby brother. If you ever study the book on birth order, personality of birth orders, one of the things that they've kind of found that everybody already knew about birth order people is that if you're the baby of the family, you don't approach life and you don't think about things the same way as the firstborn does. You just don't. And one of the characteristics of a baby of the family is they don't have to stress about anything because there's always somebody there to bail them out. They don't have to quickly do what mom says because somebody will bail them out. They don't have to be too careful because if somebody sees them doing it wrong, they'll step in and tell them they're doing it wrong. That's one of the characteristics of being the youngest of the family, the baby of the family. John was the baby of this family. And one of the things that the baby of the family is convinced of is that since everybody makes my life better, mama must love me more. And there's times you can kind of see that. It's like older kids almost say, well, why is mom treating them like that? I couldn't get away with that. I couldn't get away with that. Well, no, because you're not them. They're not the same as they were. I'm not the same father that raised my first as raised my fourth. And yet, there's personality traits in my fourth that didn't need to be beat on like a rock, like the rock head in my firstborn's head.
The younger ones are always smarter because they see the mistakes the older ones made, but they
Exactly. That didn't work. That didn't work. That didn't work. That didn't work. Yeah. My baby brother talks about that. He says he actually did that on purpose. That he would actually watch what happened to the rest of us when we did stuff we weren't supposed to do, and he'd say, "I'm not supposed. I don't guess I'll do that." Because I was always the one that, Jesus talked about a man who had two sons, told him to go work in his vineyard. One said, "I won't," but later went. One said, "I will," but didn't go. I was the older brother. "I won't," but then I'd do it. My little brother would, "Oh, I got you taken care of, Dad. I got it. I'll do it." Never did it. And then I got in trouble because I was the oldest one. I should have took him along with me and made sure he did what he was supposed to do. See, that's the way this birth order thing works. We see that in these relationships in Scripture as well. So John refers to himself as the disciple whom Jesus loved. Well, Jesus claimed that he loved them all to the end. But there was something about, and John said, John was convinced there was something special between him and Jesus. I bet Peter felt the same way. There was something special between him and Jesus. And if you're a person of prayer and Bible study, I would be very surprised if in the deep corners of your mind and heart you don't feel like there's something special between you and Jesus. You might not want anybody to know. You might think you're being proud and pompous if you were to say it.
I've got a poster at home that says, "Jesus loves you, but I'm his favorite."
See, that's my baby brother always said. Mama loves you guys, but I'm her favorite. Yeah, well.
You know, that's all of us do. My brother-in-law said one time, "I've never seen a family like this." He said, "There's 9 kids here." He said, "And they all
Yeah, yeah.
every one of them
Think they're the special one. See?
that they're the only child."
Exactly. Now, before we run out of time here, I still got 4 minutes. I want to imagine how they would have gone. They would have had a what they call a triclinium table, which was a three-sided U-shaped table, and it would have been about this far off the ground. It wouldn't be like Michelangelo's picture of the Last Supper of people sitting in chairs on a tall table. They would have sat on a triclinium, and more the Eastern way to eat. And so you would have pillows to sit on. You would get on the ground, and you would lean on your left arm, because in the Eastern culture, the right hand is for eating and drinking. The left hand is for going to the bathroom. And even if you've washed, you come to the table and you keep your left hand away from the table and you lean on that elbow to remind yourself, don't eat with that elbow. Don't use that hand. That's bad. That's not good manners. And so you would lean with the table here, with everybody's feet pointing out from the center. And you would lean on your left, and you would be facing this person who would also be leaning on their left, with the person behind you would also be leaning on their left. Now, in these parties, if you were the one giving the party, which Jesus was the host for this meal, the two places next to him were special places. Just being there said something. If nobody even said anything, just them being there said something. So, keep that in mind when it says this here. Jesus said, Simon motioned to the disciple and said, ask him which one he means. Leaning back against Jesus, he asked him, Lord, who is it? So which side of Jesus is the one that's leaning back on him and saying, Lord, who is it? Which one's going to betray you? Peter wants to know. I'm the baby, so I'm supposed to get you to tell me. Jesus is laying on his left arm, facing this way, which means, who's right here? John, the beloved disciple that Peter's just said, ask him what he means. Which one of us is it? It's like sending the baby to go ask Mom, can we have a candy bar? She'll give you one for she'll give me one, right? Anybody want to guess who was sitting on the other side of Jesus? Judas. Anybody want to guess what the position of this person was in the group? This would have been the honored guest. You're the host. The one you're facing is the honored guest. The one behind you is called the intimate friend. And it's the job of the intimate friend to watch your back. So we still use those words today, right? I got your back, right? I got you. I got your six. I got you. This goes way back into history. This idea. Judas is in the place of the intimate friend, and their closeness is such that Jesus dips his bread into the broth at the same time as him so they could eat at the same time as intimate friends. And it's Judas that a few hours later is going to come into the garden and kiss him on the cheeks as an intimate friend. What would it be like if you were Jesus? You ever been in one of those situations where somebody's kind of treating you nice, but you know they don't mean it, and you know they're just going to stab you in the back the first chance they get, but you got to put a smile on your face and you got to play nice? Well, sometimes you want to keep the job, you do. You want to keep peace in the neighborhood, sometimes you do. So the point of all this is this. There are those who honor Jesus with just their words. There are those who honor Jesus with their lives and their actions. And there are those who don't honor Jesus at all, and in fact wish he was dead and wouldn't bother them anymore. Which are we? The answer is not what we say. The answer is what do we do? Because talk's cheap. And so I hope that our actions show others that we're in the right group, because at some point we're going to have to give an answer for the way we live. All right, let's pray. Father, thank you for these stories from Jesus' life. Thank you that he faced the same things with his followers that your followers will take. God, I pray that you would help each of us to be strong and faithful. May we treat each other well. May we treat our enemies well. May we represent you well in the world we live in, so that there would be no embarrassment when you return again. In Christ's name we pray.